She can't afford a lawyer." Her husband laughed in court. Then the judge said 4 words that changed everything. Keisha Brightwell stood in family court, clutching a manila folder worth more than her husband's entire legal defense, while he mocked her poverty in front of everyone. Malcolm Brightwell, corporate attorney, sat beside his $850 an hour counsel, smirking as she represented herself. He had no idea the woman he'd stripped of every asset had just spent 3 years building something he couldn't buy, leverage, or destroy. What the judge said next didn't just silence the courtroom. It rewrote Malcolm's entire future. Before we dive into this incredible story, I need you to do something important. If you appreciate real stories about justice, resilience, and people who rise when the world counts them out, hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, take 2 seconds and click it. Then smash that like button because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear these stories. And here's what I really want to know. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in Atlanta, Brooklyn, London, Amsterdam, Lagos? I want to see how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to Keisha, because what she did next was absolutely brilliant. The courtroom smelled like old wood polish and recycled air. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across rows of wooden benches. Keisha Brightwell sat alone at the respondent's table, a single blue pen resting on top of her folder. Her navy blazer was 3 years old, pressed carefully that morning, the cuffs just slightly worn. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, small gold studs in her ears, the only jewelry she'd kept after the separation. Across the aisle, Malcolm Brightwell leaned back in his leather chair, legs crossed, one arm draped casually over the armrest. His charcoal Tom Ford suit probably cost more than Keisha's entire month of groceries. Beside him sat Gregory Whitmore, senior partner at Whitmore & Associates, a man whose hourly rate could fund a modest wedding. Gregory's silver cufflinks caught the light as he shuffled through a stack of documents, each page carefully tabbed with colored markers. The bailiff called the room to order. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Okonkwo presiding. Everyone stood. Judge Okonkwo entered from the side door, her black robe flowing as she took her seat behind the elevated bench. She was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp eyes that had witnessed every courtroom game imaginable. Her reputation preceded her, fair, no nonsense, and allergic to legal theatrics. "Please be seated," she said, her voice carrying authority without effort. The room settled. Keisha smoothed her skirt and sat upright, hands folded on the table. Malcolm whispered something to Gregory, who smiled slightly and nodded. Judge Okonkwo adjusted her reading glasses and glanced at the docket. Case number 47, 2024, FC, Brightwell versus Brightwell. Petition for dissolution of marriage, custody arrangements, and division of marital assets. She looked up. "Counselor Whitmore, I see you're representing Mr. Brightwell." Gregory stood smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor, Gregory Whitmore representing Malcolm Brightwell." "And Mrs. Brightwell," the judge continued, looking directly at Keisha. "Are you representing yourself today?" Keisha rose, her voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm proceeding pro se." Malcolm leaned toward Gregory and whispered loud enough for Keisha to hear. "This should be quick." Gregory stifled a smile. Judge Okonkwo's eyes flicked toward them, but she said nothing. She opened the file in front of her, scanning the documents in silence. The courtroom held its breath. Somewhere in the back, a woman coughed softly. "Mr. Whitmore," Judge Okonkwo said, "your client has filed a motion requesting full custody of the minor children, division of the marital home, and significant alimony payments from Mrs. Brightwell. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Gregory said, standing again. "My client has been the primary financial provider throughout the marriage. Mrs. Brightwell abandoned the marital residence without notice, leaving him to maintain the household and care for the children. We believe the court will find that Mr. Brightwell is the more stable parent and deserves primary custody." Keisha's jaw tightened. but she remained silent. Judge Okonkwo turned to Keisha. Mrs. Brightwell, you filed a counter motion requesting joint custody and equitable distribution of assets. You're also requesting spousal support, correct? Yes, Your Honor, Keisha said clearly. Malcolm snorted softly. Gregory placed a hand on his arm, but Malcolm ignored him. Your Honor, Malcolm said suddenly, half standing, may I address the court? Judge Okonkwo looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Brightwell, you have counsel present. Please allow him to speak on your behalf. Malcolm waved a dismissive hand. With all due respect, Your Honor, I think everyone in this room can see what's happening here. My wife can't even afford legal representation. She's sitting there with a folder and a pen like she's at a PTA meeting. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Keisha's fingers curled slightly, but her face remained calm. Mr. Brightwell, Judge Okonkwo said, her tone cooling, sit down. He didn't. Your Honor, I don't mean to be rude, but this is a waste of the court's time. She has no assets, no income, no ability to provide for our children. I've been funding everything, the mortgage, the private school tuition, the medical insurance, everything. And now she wants half? Mr. Brightwell, the judge repeated, her voice sharpening, sit down. Malcolm hesitated, then sank back into his chair, still smirking. Gregory leaned over and whispered urgently, but Malcolm waved him off. Judge Okonkwo turned to Keisha. Mrs. Brightwell, do you have a response to your husband's claims? Keisha stood slowly. She looked directly at the judge, not at Malcolm. Your Honor, I don't dispute that my husband earned the majority of our household income during our marriage. He's a talented attorney, but his income was possible because I managed our home, raised our children, and supported his career for 12 years. I put my own education on hold so he could finish law school. I worked 2 jobs while he studied for the bar exam. And when his career took off, I stayed home because we agreed it was best for our family. Her voice was calm, measured, but every word carried weight. After our separation, she continued, Mr. Brightwell froze our joint accounts, changed the locks on our home, and told our children I had abandoned them. I've been living in a 1-bedroom apartment, working as a paralegal, trying to rebuild my life from nothing. I don't have a high-powered legal team, Your Honor, but I have the truth. Malcolm laughed. Actually laughed, out loud, in open court. Judge Okonkwo's head turned slowly toward him, like a predator locking onto movement. Did you find something amusing, Mr. Brightwell? She asked, her tone glacial. Malcolm leaned back, arms crossed. Your Honor, forgive me, but yes. My wife just painted herself as some kind of victim. The truth is, she walked out because she couldn't handle the lifestyle we'd built. She wanted to find herself, or whatever empowerment nonsense she'd been reading. I didn't freeze anything. I protected our assets from someone who clearly wasn't thinking straight. Mr. Brightwell, Gregory started. And now, Malcolm continued, ignoring his own lawyer, she shows up here without representation, expecting this court to just hand her half of everything I've worked for? She can't even afford a lawyer, Your Honor. How is she going to afford our children? Silence. Cold, heavy silence. Judge Okonkwo set down her pen. She removed her glasses, folded them carefully, and placed them on the bench. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. Mr. Whitmore, she said, control your client or I will hold him in contempt. Gregory stood immediately. Apologies, Your Honor, it won't happen again. See that it doesn't. Judge Okonkwo turned to Keisha. Mrs. Brightwell, you mentioned you've been working as a paralegal since the separation. Can you provide proof of employment and income? Yes, Your Honor. Keisha opened her folder and pulled out several documents. She walked forward and handed them to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. Malcolm leaned toward Gregory. This is ridiculous. She's stalling. Judge Okonkwo reviewed the documents in silence. Her expression shifted slightly, a subtle flicker of interest crossing her features. She looked up at Keisha. Mrs. Brightwell, she said slowly, According to these tax documents, you've reported significant income over the past 2 years. Care to explain? Keisha nodded. Yes, Your Honor. While working as a paralegal, I also completed my law degree online through a distance learning program. I passed the bar exam 7 months ago and recently accepted a position as an associate attorney at Harmon & Reed. The courtroom went still. Malcolm's smirk vanished. He sat forward, staring at Keisha like she just sprouted wings. Harmon & Reed? Judge Okonkwo repeated. Yes, Your Honor. I specialize in family law and estate planning. Gregory's eyes widened. He quickly pulled out his phone and started typing under the table. Malcolm grabbed his arm. What? What is it? Gregory didn't answer. His face had gone pale. Judge Okonkwo leaned back in her chair, a faint hint of satisfaction in her eyes. Mrs. Brightwell, are you telling this court that while your husband claimed you had no income, no prospects, and no ability to provide for your children, you were actively building a legal career? Yes, Your Honor. Malcolm stood abruptly. That's impossible. She never... Sit down, Mr. Brightwell, the judge snapped. This time, he did. Judge Okonkwo looked at Keisha. Do you have documentation proving your employment and bar certification? I do, Your Honor. Keisha pulled out additional documents and handed them forward. The bailiff delivered them to the judge. As Judge Okonkwo reviewed them, the silence in the courtroom grew oppressive. Malcolm stared at Keisha, his mouth slightly open, his mind clearly racing. Gregory was still scrolling furiously on his phone. Finally, Judge Okonkwo looked up. These appear to be in order. She turned to Malcolm. Mr. Brightwell, it seems your assessment of your wife's financial situation was inaccurate. Malcolm's voice came out strained. Your Honor, I had no idea she was... That's becoming abundantly clear, the judge interrupted. She looked down at the documents again, then back at Keisha. Mrs. Brightwell, I'm also seeing here that you've listed additional assets acquired post-separation. A vehicle, savings accounts, investment portfolios. Can you explain the source of these funds? Keisha's expression remained composed. Yes, Your Honor. In addition to my salary, I've been consulting on legal cases independently. I've also received compensation for publishing articles in legal journals and speaking at professional conferences. All of this income has been properly reported and taxed. Judge Okonkwo nodded slowly. And your husband was unaware of these activities? We've had no communication regarding my professional life since the separation, Your Honor. Mr. Brightwell made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me unless it involved the children. Malcolm's face flushed red. This is insane. She's been hiding income. Mr. Brightwell, Judge Okonkwo said coldly, one more outburst and you'll be removed from this courtroom. Do you understand me? Malcolm clenched his jaw but said nothing. The judge turned back to Keisha. Mrs. Brightwell, I want to be very clear. You're claiming that during your separation, you completed law school, passed the bar, secured employment at a reputable firm, and built additional income streams, all while your husband claimed you were destitute? That's correct, Your Honor. Judge Okonkwo allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. Impressive. Malcolm looked like he'd been punched. Gregory whispered something urgent in his ear, but Malcolm shook his head violently. Your Honor, Gregory said, standing quickly, we'd like to request a brief recess to review this new information. Denied, Judge Okonkwo said flatly. You've had months to prepare, counselor. This is your client's failure, not the court's problem. Gregory sat down heavily. Malcolm's hands were shaking. Judge Okonkwo shuffled the papers in front of her, then looked up at both parties. Here's what's going to happen, she said. Based on the evidence presented, it's clear that Mrs. Brightwell is fully capable of providing financial stability for herself and her children. The narrative that she's helpless or dependent is demonstrably false. Malcolm's face had gone from red to gray. Keisha remained perfectly still, her expression neutral, professional. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mr. Brightwell's behavior in this courtroom has been disrespectful, dismissive, and indicative of a fundamental lack of regard for these proceedings and for his wife. That concerns me greatly when considering custody arrangements. Your Honor, Malcolm started. I'm not finished, Judge Okonkwo cut him off. Her voice could have frozen fire. This court will adjourn for the day. We will reconvene in 1 week. During that time, I expect both parties to submit complete financial disclosures. And Mr. Brightwell, that means everything. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, retirement funds, business interests, all of it. If I find out you've hidden so much as a savings bond, I will not be pleased. She turned to Keisha. Mrs. Brightwell, you'll do the same. I want a full accounting of your assets and income sources. Yes, Your Honor, Keisha said. Judge Okonkwo picked up her gavel. This court is adjourned. The crack of the gavel echoed through the room. Everyone stood as the judge exited. The moment she was gone, the courtroom erupted in whispers. Malcolm turned on Gregory. What just happened? Gregory was already packing his briefcase. What happened is you underestimated your wife and made yourself look like a fool in front of a judge. That's what happened. But she can, and she did, Gregory said sharply. And now we're going into next week on the back foot because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. Malcolm stared across the aisle at Keisha, who was calmly collecting her documents and placing them back in her folder. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him. She simply picked up her pen, closed her folder, and walked toward the exit. As she passed his table, Malcolm called out, Keisha. She stopped, turned slowly. Her eyes met his for the first time that day. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and threatening. Keisha's expression didn't change. You're right, she said quietly. It's just beginning. Then she walked out, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Malcolm watched her go, his mind spinning, trying to process what had just happened. Gregory snapped his briefcase shut. We need to talk, now. Outside the courtroom, Keisha pushed through the heavy oak doors and stepped into the hallway. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting geometric patterns across the polished floor. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. A text from her colleague at Harman & Reed. How did it go? She typed back. Better than expected. Another buzz, this one from her sister. You good? Keisha smiled faintly. I'm good. She slipped the phone into her purse and walked toward the elevator. Behind her, through the courtroom doors, she could hear Malcolm's raised voice, frustrated and confused. She didn't turn around. She pressed the elevator button and waited, her reflection staring back at her from the polished metal doors. Composed, professional, ready. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Keisha stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor, and watched the courthouse hallway disappear as the doors slid shut. When she reached the lobby, she walked out into the bright afternoon, the city noise washing over her like a wave. People hurried past on the sidewalk, caught up in their own lives, their own battles. Keisha stood there for a moment, feeling the sun on her face. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Hi, Mom, she said softly. It's done. He knows now. On the other end, her mother's voice crackled with emotion and pride. Keisha listened, smiled, and wiped a single tear from her cheek. I'll tell you everything tonight, she said. I love you too. She ended the call, straightened her blazer, and walked toward the parking garage. Behind her, in that courtroom, Malcolm Brightwell was just beginning to understand the depth of his mistake. But Keisha was already 3 steps ahead. She always had been. Malcolm Brightwell sat in Gregory Whitmore's corner office on the 42nd floor of the Pinnacle Tower, staring out at the downtown skyline without really seeing it. The leather chair beneath him probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but he felt like he was sitting on broken glass. His tie was loosened, his jacket thrown carelessly over the back of the chair. Dark circles had formed under his eyes. He hadn't slept properly in 3 days. Gregory sat across from him, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing documents with the kind of focus that came from 30 years of high-stakes litigation. The office smelled faintly of expensive cologne in old books. Legal volumes lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their spines perfectly aligned, a testament to order and control. Everything Malcolm felt slipping away. "This is bad," Gregory said finally, not looking up from the papers. "This is really bad, Malcolm." Malcolm ran a hand over his face. "I know." "No, I don't think you do." Gregory set down the document and removed his glasses. "Your wife didn't just pass the bar exam. She graduated top 15% of her class from an accredited online law program while working full-time and raising your children on weekends. She's been published in 3 legal journals. She's been a guest lecturer at 2 paralegal certification programs, and she's now working at one of the most respected family law firms in the state." "I heard all that in court," Malcolm said tersely. "Did you hear the part where Harmon and Reed's senior partner is Judge Okonkwo's former law school roommate?" Gregory asked, his tone sharp. "Or the part where your wife has been building professional relationships with half the family court judges in this district for the past 18 months? Malcolm's head snapped up. "What?" "She's been strategic, Malcolm, methodical. While you were bragging to your golf buddies about how you'd left her with nothing, she was networking, studying, building a reputation, and now she's walked into that courtroom with credibility you can't buy." Malcolm stood abruptly and walked to the window. The city stretched out below him, indifferent to his crisis. Luxury vehicles moved like toys on the streets 42 floors down. "So what do we do?" Gregory leaned back in his chair. "We do exactly what Judge Okonkwo ordered. Full financial disclosure. Every account, every asset, every investment. And we pray your wife doesn't have an ace up her sleeve we haven't seen yet." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Gregory said carefully, "that someone who plans this carefully usually has more than one move prepared. She embarrassed you in court, Malcolm. That wasn't an accident. She knew exactly what she was doing." Malcolm's phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen. His mother. He declined the call. She'd been calling non-stop since news of the court hearing had somehow leaked to their social circle. His mother's bridge club was apparently having a field day with the story of Malcolm's wife, the one he'd claimed couldn't function without him, showing up with a law degree and a position at a prestigious firm. "The financial disclosure is going to be a problem," Malcolm admitted quietly. Gregory's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because there are some accounts Keisha doesn't know about." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Gregory stood slowly. "Please tell me you didn't hide marital assets, Malcolm." "I protected them," Malcolm said defensively. "There's a difference." "No, there isn't, not to a judge." Gregory's voice was tight with controlled anger. "What accounts? How much are we talking about?" Malcolm turned away from the window. "About 470,000, spread across 2 offshore accounts and a cryptocurrency wallet." Gregory closed his eyes and exhaled slowly through his nose. "You've got to be kidding me." "I earned that money, Gregory. My cases, my clients, my billable hours." "During your marriage," Gregory interrupted, "which makes it community property. You know this. You're an attorney, for God's sake. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that when we divorced, I wasn't going to let her take half of everything I'd worked for." "Well, congratulations," Gregory said coldly, "because when Judge Okonkwo finds out, and she will find out, you're going to lose a lot more than half. She'll crucify you for hiding assets. And your wife's attorney at Harmon and Reed? They specialize in forensic accounting. They will find every penny, Malcolm, every single one." Malcolm sank back into his chair. The fight drained out of him. "What do I do?" Gregory sat down and steepled his fingers. "You disclose everything, right now, before they find it themselves. We file an amended financial statement, claim it was an oversight, and hope Judge Okonkwo is feeling merciful, which, based on how you behaved in her courtroom, is unlikely." "An oversight? $500,000 is an oversight?" It's better than fraud, Gregory shot back, and that's what she'll call it if we don't get ahead of this. You made yourself look like an arrogant fool once already. Don't make it worse by being a criminal one too. Malcolm's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from his business partner at the firm. We need to talk about the optics of your divorce. Call me. He turned the phone face down on the desk. Gregory gathered his papers. I'll draft the amended disclosure. You're going to sign it, and we're going to file it first thing tomorrow morning. And Malcolm, from this point forward, you don't make a single decision without consulting me first. Not one. Understood? Malcolm nodded, feeling like a chastised child. Good. Now get out of my office. I have work to do. Malcolm grabbed his jacket and left without another word. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into something he couldn't name. When he reached the parking garage, he sat in his premium German sedan, a vehicle that cost more than some people's annual salary, and stared at the concrete wall in front of him. His phone rang. His mother again. This time he answered. Malcolm, darling, I've been trying to reach you for days. Not now, Mom. People are talking, sweetheart. Susan Henderson told me she heard the most ridiculous story about your court hearing. She said Keisha showed up with a law degree? That can't possibly be true. Malcolm closed his eyes. It's true. Silence. Then, what do you mean it's true? When did she? How did she? I don't know, Mom. I don't know anything anymore. Well, you need to fix this. The optics are terrible. Your father and I have a reputation in this community. We can't have people thinking, I have to go. He ended the call and immediately turned off his phone. The silence in the car was suffocating. He started the engine and drove aimlessly through the city, not ready to go home, not ready to face anything. He ended up at a bar downtown, one of those upscale places with exposed brick and craft cocktails. He ordered an expensive bourbon and sat in a corner booth, watching young professionals laugh and network, living lives that felt impossibly far from his own right now. His mind kept replaying the moment in court when Keisha had stood up and calmly destroyed every assumption he'd made about her. The way Judge Okonkwo had looked at him afterward, like he was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. The way Gregory had practically called him an idiot. Worst of all was the look in Keisha's eyes when she'd walked past him. Not anger, not hurt, just calm, cool certainty. She'd planned this, every step, and he'd walked right into it because he'd been too arrogant to see her as anything other than the woman he'd left behind. He finished his drink and ordered another. Meanwhile, across town, Keisha Brightwell sat in a conference room at Harmon & Reed with 3 senior partners and a forensic accountant. The late afternoon sun slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. Manila folders and financial documents covered every surface. He's hiding assets, said the forensic accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Doreen Mathis, who'd spent 20 years tracking money for divorce cases. The lifestyle he's been maintaining doesn't match his reported income and expenses. There's money somewhere else. Marcus Harmon, the firm's founding partner, leaned forward. How certain are you? 95%, Doreen replied. His tax returns show income from his firm, but his spending patterns suggest additional revenue streams. High-end restaurant charges, luxury vehicle payments, country club fees, private school tuition. It's all adding up to about 60% more than he's declaring. Keisha sat quietly, taking it all in. She'd suspected Malcolm was hiding money, but hearing it confirmed felt different, heavier somehow. Can we prove it? Asked Victoria Chen, another senior partner who specialized in complex asset division. Give me 2 weeks, Doreen said. I'll need subpoenas for his banking records, credit card statements, and investment accounts. If he's moved money offshore or into cryptocurrency, I'll find it. Marcus looked at Keisha. This is your case, Keisha. How do you want to proceed? Keisha met his gaze steadily. I want everything he tried to hide, not because I need it, but because he needs to understand that what he did was wrong. He locked me out of my own home. He turned my children against me. He told everyone I was worthless. I want the court to see exactly who he is." Victoria nodded approvingly. "Judge Okonkwo doesn't tolerate hidden assets. If we can prove he deliberately concealed community property, she'll hammer him." "There's something else," Doreen added. "I found some irregularities in his firm's billing records. It looks like he might have been inflating hours on certain client accounts. Nothing massive, but enough to raise questions about professional ethics." The room went quiet. That was a different level of problem. That wasn't just divorce court. That was bar association territory. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked carefully. Doreen nodded. "I'll need to dig deeper to be certain, but the patterns are there. Blocks of time that don't align with court appearances or documented meetings. It's subtle, but it's there." Keisha felt something cold settle in her stomach. As angry as she was at Malcolm, she'd never wanted to destroy his career entirely. She'd wanted justice, accountability, but this could end him professionally. Victoria must have seen something in her expression. "Keisha, I know this is hard, but if he's been committing billing fraud, his clients have a right to know. And the court needs to know the full picture of who they're dealing with." "I understand," Keisha said quietly. I didn't think it would go this far." "He made it go this far," Marcus said gently. "You didn't create this situation. You're just refusing to be a victim in it. There's a difference." Keisha nodded slowly. "Keep investigating. I want to know everything." "We'll need you to sign some authorizations," Victoria said, sliding papers across the table, "for the subpoenas and records requests." Keisha picked up a pen and began signing. Each signature felt like another door closing on the life she'd once known. The marriage was over, she'd accepted that. But this was something else. This was excavating the foundation and discovering the whole structure had been rotten all along. When she finished, Marcus gathered the documents. "This is going to get ugly, Keisha. Malcolm's going to fight back. He's going to make accusations, try to discredit you, maybe even go after your professional reputation. Are you prepared for that?" "I've been preparing for 3 years," Keisha said, "since the day he told me I was nothing without him." Victoria smiled slightly. "Then let's make sure the judge sees exactly what you've built. We'll file our preliminary findings with the court tomorrow. Malcolm's attorney will receive copies and will request an expedited hearing to address the asset disclosure issues." "How long until we're back in court?" Keisha asked. "Judge Okonkwo set the date for 1 week from the initial hearing," Marcus replied. "That gives us time to gather evidence, but not much. We'll need to work fast." "I can work fast," Keisha said. The meeting continued for another hour, going over strategy, discussing contingencies, preparing for every possible response Malcolm's team might have. By the time Keisha left the office, the sun had set, and the city lights were glittering against the darkening sky. She walked to her vehicle, a reliable Japanese sedan she purchased 3 months ago with her first substantial paycheck from the firm. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a status symbol, but it was hers, paid for with money she'd earned, and that meant more than any luxury brand ever could. As she drove home, her phone rang. Her daughter, Amara. She answered on Bluetooth. "Hey, baby." "Hi, Mom." Amara's voice was cautious, uncertain. "Dad told us about court today." Keisha's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What did he say?" "He said you're trying to take all his money and that you're being mean." The words stung, even though Keisha had expected them. "Amara, sweetheart, that's not what's happening. Your dad and I have some grown-up things we need to work out with the judge. It's complicated, but I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to make sure things are fair." "He seemed really upset," Amara said quietly. "And he said you didn't even try to work things out, that you just hired expensive lawyers to attack him." Keisha pulled into her apartment complex parking lot and sat in silence for a moment. "Amara, I know this is hard, and I know your dad is hurting, but there are things about this situation that you're too young to understand fully. When you're older, I promise I'll explain everything. For now, I just need you to trust that I love you and your brother more than anything in this world. Everything I'm doing because I believe it's right. Can you trust me on that?" A long pause, then softly, "I guess. That's all I can ask." Keisha's voice caught slightly. "How's Jamal?" "He's okay. He doesn't really get what's going on. He just wants you to come home." "I want that too, baby. Soon, okay? I love you." "Love you too, Mom." The call ended. Keisha sat in her vehicle in the dark parking lot, letting herself feel the weight of it all for just a moment. Then she wiped her eyes, gathered her briefcase, and went inside. Her apartment was small, a one-bedroom where she'd given Amara and Jamal the bedroom on weekends, and slept on the pull-out couch herself. The furniture was second-hand, the kitchen appliances basic, but it was clean and it was safe, and it was hers. She'd made it a home with what little she had. She made herself tea and sat at the small dining table, pulling out her laptop. There was work to do, case files to review, evidence to organize, strategy to refine. The forensic accountant's preliminary findings needed to be cross-referenced with the timeline of Malcolm's spending. If they could prove he'd been systematically hiding money while claiming she was destitute, Judge Okonkwo would see right through him. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Keisha worked through it all, fueled by tea and determination. Around 2 a.m, her phone buzzed with an email. Gregory Whitmore's firm. She opened it. Amended financial disclosure, Malcolm Brightwell. Her heart rate picked up. She downloaded the attachment and began reading. As she scrolled through the pages, her eyes widened. Malcolm had disclosed the offshore accounts, the cryptocurrency wallet, nearly $500,000 he'd hidden. At the bottom of the disclosure was a note from Gregory. "Please note that these accounts were inadvertently omitted from the initial filing due to an administrative oversight. We apologize for any confusion." Keisha laughed out loud in her empty apartment. Administrative oversight. They'd found out she had forensic accountants on the case and panicked. Malcolm had blinked first. She forwarded the email to Marcus, Victoria, and Doreen with a single line. "They're running scared." Within minutes, her phone rang. "Marcus, you saw it?" "I saw it," Keisha said. $500,000, an administrative oversight. "Judge Okonkwo is going to eat him alive," Marcus said, and she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "This is exactly what we needed. He just admitted to hiding significant marital assets. Even with the excuse, the damage is done." What happens now? Now we respond. We file a motion citing his amended disclosure as evidence of bad faith and request sanctions. We argue that if he hid this much money, there could be more. We ask for a full forensic audit at his expense. And we make sure Judge Okonkwo knows he only disclosed it after we indicated we were conducting our own investigation. Keisha felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about accountability, about proving that actions had consequences, even for successful corporate attorneys who thought they were untouchable. "Do it," she said. "We'll file first thing in the morning. Get some sleep, Keisha. We have a busy week ahead." She ended the call and sat in the quiet of her apartment, laptop glowing in the darkness. Outside her window, the city slept, unaware of the storm gathering in its family courts. Malcolm had made his move, but it was too late. The truth was already coming out, piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Keisha closed her laptop and finally allowed herself to feel it. Not victory, not yet, but something close. Hope, maybe, or justice, finally in sight. She turned off the lights and lay down on her pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling. In 6 days, they'd be back in court, and this time, Malcolm Brightwell was going to learn exactly what it cost to underestimate the woman he'd sworn to love, honor, and cherish. The woman he'd dismissed as nothing was about to show him everything. The week passed in a blur of legal filings, depositions, and strategic planning. Keisha barely slept, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. The firm's conference room became her second home, papers spreading across every surface like evidence of a coming reckoning. Doreen, the forensic accountant, worked around the clock, tracing Malcolm's financial footprints through a maze of accounts, transactions, and carefully constructed paper trails. On Thursday afternoon, 3 days before the hearing, Doreen walked into the conference room with an expression Keisha had learned to recognize, the look of someone who just struck gold. "Tell me you found something," Victoria said, looking up from her laptop. Doreen set down a thick folder. "I found everything." She opened it, spreading documents across the table. Malcolm didn't just hide money. He's been systematically diverting marital assets for at least 18 months. Look at this. Monthly transfers from his business account to a shell company registered in Delaware. The shell company then moved funds to the offshore accounts. Keisha leaned forward, studying the bank statements. The numbers told a story Malcolm had hoped would stay buried. "How much total?" $683,000, Doreen said. "That's on top of the $470 he disclosed in the amended filing. He's still hiding over $200,000. The room went silent. Marcus whistled low. He amended his disclosure and still lied? Either he's incredibly stupid, or he genuinely thought we wouldn't find this, Doreen replied. The shell company is registered under his college roommate's name, Jason Pemberton. But the financial activity correlates perfectly with Malcolm's spending patterns. Same timestamps, same transaction amounts, just filtered through an extra layer. Can we prove Malcolm controls this account? Keisha asked. The IP addresses for the online transfers trace back to his law firm's network and his home address, Doreen said, pulling out another document. He was literally making these transfers from his office computer during work hours. We've got him. Victoria was already typing on her laptop. We need to file an emergency motion. This is fraud, plain and simple. Judge Okonkwo needs to know before Monday's hearing. There's more, Doreen continued. The billing irregularities I mentioned, I found documentation. He's been padding hours on at least 4 major client accounts over the past 2 years. We're talking about roughly $90,000 in overbilling. Marcus stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. That's a state bar violation. That could get him disbarred. Keisha felt the weight of it settle over her. This had started as a divorce case, a fight for fair treatment and custody of her children. Now it was threatening to unravel Malcolm's entire professional life. Part of her, a small part she wasn't proud of, felt satisfaction. But a larger part felt something else. Sadness, maybe. For what they'd been, for what he'd become, for the wreckage of it all. Keisha, Victoria's voice cut through her thoughts. Are you okay with this? Keisha looked up at the 3 attorneys watching her. You're asking if I want to destroy my children's father. We're asking what you want us to do with this information, Marcus said gently. This is beyond asset division now. This is professional misconduct. Once we file this with the court, it becomes part of the public record. The state bar will see it, his clients will see it, his career may not survive it. Keisha stood and walked to the window beside Marcus. The city sprawled below them, thousands of people living their lives, fighting their own battles. 3 years ago, Malcolm told me I was worthless. He said I had nothing to offer, that I was just a housewife with no prospects and no value. He froze our accounts and changed the locks while I was visiting my mother. He told our children I'd abandoned them. He made me sleep on a friend's couch for 2 months while I saved enough for a security deposit on that tiny apartment. She turned to face the room. I rebuilt my entire life from nothing. I went to school full-time while working 2 jobs. I studied for the bar exam while living on ramen noodles and generic groceries. I did all of that because he made me believe I had to prove my worth. Not to him. He'd already made up his mind about me, but to myself. Her voice grew stronger. And now I find out that while I was doing all that, while I was clawing my way back from rock bottom, he was stealing from our marriage, lying to the court, and defrauding his own clients. So yes, Victoria, I'm okay with this, because he did this to himself. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. Victoria nodded slowly. Then we file everything, tomorrow morning. Do it, Keisha said. The emergency motion was filed at 9 a.m. Friday. By noon, Gregory Whitmore had called Marcus's office 17 times. By 2 p.m., Malcolm himself was calling, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Keisha listened to one of them, forwarded by the firm's receptionist. Keisha, what the hell are you doing? You're trying to ruin me. This is insane. We can work this out. We don't need to destroy each other. Call me back, please. She deleted the message without responding. Judge Okonkwo scheduled an emergency hearing for Saturday morning, an unusual move that signaled the seriousness of the allegations. When Keisha arrived at the courthouse at 8:30, news vans were already parked outside. Somehow, word had leaked. A high-powered attorney accused of hiding assets and billing fraud during his own divorce made for compelling local news. Keisha walked through a small crowd of reporters, ignoring their questions, her head high. She wore a charcoal suit, professional, authoritative, unshakable. Inside, her stomach churned, but her face showed nothing but calm determination. The courtroom was more crowded than before. Malcolm's law partners sat in the gallery, their expressions grim. His mother was there too, clutching her purse like a shield, her face pinched with worry and embarrassment. On Keisha's side, her sister and her mother sat in the front row, providing silent support. Malcolm looked terrible. His expensive suit couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes, the defeat in his posture. Gregory sat beside him, professional as always, but even he looked strained. All rise. Judge Okonkwo entered, and the room fell silent. She took her seat, arranged her papers, and looked out over the courtroom with an expression that promised no mercy for anyone who wasted her time. We're here on an emergency motion filed by Mrs. Brightwell's counsel, she began. The allegations are serious. Mr. Brightwell, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond, but I want to be very clear. I've read the financial documentation submitted by Mrs. Brightwell's forensic accountant. I've reviewed the amended disclosure your attorney filed, and I'm not happy about what I'm seeing. Malcolm stood. Your Honor, if I could. Sit down, Mr. Brightwell. Your attorney will speak for you. Judge Okonkwo's tone left no room for argument. Gregory rose. Your Honor, my client has been fully cooperative with the discovery process. The initial omission of certain accounts was an honest mistake. Counselor, the judge interrupted, your client disclosed $470,000 in hidden assets only after Mrs. Brightwell indicated she had hired a forensic accountant. That's not cooperation. That's damage control. And according to the documents filed yesterday, he's still hiding over $200,000 in additional funds. How do you explain that? Gregory's jaw tightened. Your Honor, we were not aware of the additional accounts referenced in yesterday's filing. Your client maintains he accidentally forgot about nearly $700,000 in marital assets? Judge Okonkwo's skepticism was palpable. Does that sound credible to you, Counselor? The silence was crushing. Gregory's face had gone pale. Your Honor, we request time to review the new allegations and prepare a proper response. Denied. You've had months to prepare. Mrs. Brightwell's team was able to uncover this information in 1 week. Why couldn't you? The judge turned to Marcus. Counselor Harmon, walk me through what your team found. Marcus stood, composed and confident. Your Honor, our forensic accountant traced a pattern of systematic asset diversion beginning approximately 18 months ago. Mr. Brightwell created a shell company under an associate's name and used it to funnel marital assets into offshore accounts. The documentation shows clear intent to hide community property from division proceedings. He handed a stack of documents to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. These are bank statements, wire transfer records, and IP address logs showing that Mr. Brightwell personally initiated these transactions from his office and home computers. There's no ambiguity here. This was deliberate. Judge Okonkwo reviewed the documents in silence. The courtroom held its breath. When she looked up, her expression was stone cold. Mr. Whitmore, do you have any evidence contradicting these findings? Gregory looked at Malcolm, who shook his head almost imperceptibly. No, Your Honor. We would need time to conduct our own investigation. You've had all the time in the world, the judge said flatly. Here's what's going to happen. I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all of Mr. Brightwell's accounts, personal, business, and any entity in which he holds an interest. I'm appointing a court-supervised accountant to conduct a complete audit at Mr. Brightwell's expense. And I'm issuing sanctions in the amount of $50,000 payable to Mrs. Brightwell's legal team for the costs incurred in uncovering information that should have been disclosed voluntarily. Malcolm's face went white. His mother gasped audibly from the gallery. The reporters in the back row scribbled frantically. Your Honor, Gregory started, those sanctions are excessive. Are they? Judge Okonkwo's eyes flashed. Your client stood in my courtroom and mocked his wife for being unable to afford legal representation. He laughed at her. He told this court she was destitute and incapable of providing for their children. And all the while he was hiding $750,000 in marital assets. $50,000 is a bargain, counselor. She turned to Keisha. Mrs. Brightwell, I want you to know that this court takes asset concealment very seriously. Your husband's behavior has been deplorable, and the sanctions reflect that. Thank you, Your Honor, Keisha said quietly. Judge Okonkwo wasn't finished. There's also the matter of the billing irregularities mentioned in yesterday's filing. Mr. Whitmore, is your client aware that these allegations have been forwarded to the State Bar Association? Malcolm stood suddenly. Your Honor, those allegations are... Mr. Brightwell, sit down. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. You've said quite enough in this courtroom. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Malcolm sank back into his chair, trembling. Gregory placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, but Malcolm shrugged it off. The State Bar will conduct their own investigation, Judge Okonkwo continued. That's outside this court's jurisdiction. However, it does inform my decisions regarding custody and asset distribution. A parent facing potential professional sanctions is not in a stable position to claim primary custody. She looked directly at Malcolm. Mr. Brightwell, you came into this courtroom believing your wife was beneath you. You believed she had no power, no resources, no ability to challenge you. You were wrong, spectacularly wrong, and your arrogance has cost you dearly. The judge gathered her papers. We'll reconvene Monday morning at 9 a.m. for the final custody and asset distribution hearing. Between now and then, Mr. Brightwell, I suggest you think very carefully about how you want to proceed. Because if I find out you've hidden one more penny, one more asset, one more anything, I will throw the book at you so hard your grandchildren will feel it. Am I clear? Yes, Your Honor, Malcolm whispered. Good. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell with finality. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Reporters rushed for the exits to file their stories. Malcolm sat frozen, staring at the table in front of him. His mother pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face, demanding to know how this could have happened. Keisha gathered her things slowly, letting the chaos swirl around her. Marcus leaned over. That was even better than I hoped. Judge Okonkwo just handed us everything we needed for Monday. It's not about winning, Keisha said softly. It's about my kids seeing that truth matters, that you can't just lie and cheat and expect no consequences. Victoria joined them. The reporters are going to want a statement. Are you ready for that? Keisha nodded. Let's get it over with. They walked out together, Marcus and Victoria flanking her like sentries. The reporters converged immediately, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. Mrs. Brightwell, how do you feel about the judge's ruling? Mrs. Brightwell, Did you know your husband was hiding money? Do you think he'll lose his license to practice law? Keisha held up a hand and the crowd quieted slightly. I have a brief statement, she said, her voice steady. For years, I was told I had no value, no worth, no future without my husband. I was told I should be grateful for whatever I was given and never ask for more. Today, Judge Okonkwo reminded everyone in that courtroom that the truth matters, that honesty matters, that you can't build a life on lies and expect it to stand. She paused, choosing her words carefully. This case was never about revenge. It was about justice. It was about making sure my children see that their mother fought for what was right, even when everyone said she couldn't win. I hope other women in similar situations see this and know they don't have to accept being diminished. They can rebuild. They can fight back. They can win. What about your husband's career? Someone shouted. That's between him, his clients, and the state bar, Keisha said. I didn't create his problems. I just refused to ignore them. One more question. Do you regret the marriage? Keisha considered this. I regret how it ended, but I don't regret the life lessons it taught me. I learned I'm stronger than I ever knew, and that's worth something. She nodded to Marcus and Victoria, and they guided her through the crowd to the parking garage. When they finally reached her vehicle, Keisha leaned against it, exhausting washing over her like a wave. You did great, Victoria said. That was perfect. I don't feel perfect, Keisha admitted. I feel tired. Go home, Marcus said gently. Rest. Monday's going to be a long day, but we're ready. We've got everything we need. Keisha nodded, climbed into her vehicle, and drove home through the midday traffic. Her phone rang constantly. Friends, family, former colleagues, everyone wanting to know what happened. She ignored them all. Right now, she needed silence. When she reached her apartment, she collapsed on her couch and closed her eyes. Her mind replayed the judge's words. You were wrong, spectacularly wrong, and your arrogance has cost you dearly. Those 4 words the judge had said in the courtroom days ago kept echoing. You already did understand. That's when Malcolm had realized Keisha knew exactly what she was doing. That moment when his face changed, when he understood he'd been outplayed from the beginning. Her phone buzzed. A text from her daughter, Amara. Mom, is Dad okay? He's really upset. Keisha's heart clenched. She typed back carefully, Your dad is going through a hard time, but he'll be okay. Sometimes adults have to face consequences for their choices. I'll explain more when I see you. I love you. Love you too. Keisha set down her phone and stared at the ceiling. Monday would bring the final hearing, custody arrangements, final asset division, the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She'd fought so hard to get here, sacrificed so much, rebuilt herself from nothing. And now, finally, she was about to win. But victory felt different than she'd imagined. It wasn't triumphant or joyous. It was quiet, bittersweet, earned at a cost she was still calculating. Her children would grow up in a broken home. Malcolm's career might never recover. Their families would carry this story for years. But she'd stood up for herself. She'd refused to be erased, dismissed, or forgotten. And that mattered. That mattered more than anything else. Sunday passed in a haze of preparation. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Keisha dressed in her best suit, the navy one she'd bought for her first day at Harmon and Reed. She looked at herself in the mirror, a successful attorney, a mother, a survivor. You've got this, she told her reflection. The courthouse was less crowded this time, though a few reporters still lingered outside. Keisha walked in with her head high, flanked by her legal team. Her mother and sister were already seated in the gallery, their presence a comfort. Malcolm arrived minutes later, looking diminished somehow. His expensive suit hung differently on him, as if he'd lost weight. His eyes were hollow, ringed with dark circles. Gregory walked beside him, professional but noticeably cooler than before. Judge Okonkwo entered promptly at 9. "Let's proceed," she said without preamble. "I've reviewed all submissions from both parties. I've considered the financial disclosures, the forensic accounting reports, and the character evidence presented. I'm ready to rule." The courtroom went silent. Keisha's heart pounded in her chest. "First custody," Judge Okonkwo began. "Based on the evidence, I'm granting joint legal custody with a 60-40 physical custody split in favor of Mrs. Brightwell. The children will reside primarily with their mother, with Mr. Brightwell having them alternate weekends and one weeknight per week." Malcolm's face crumpled. His mother sobbed quietly in the gallery. "Second, asset division. Given Mr. Brightwell's deliberate concealment of marital assets, I'm awarding Mrs. Brightwell 65% of all community property. This includes the primary residence, which will be sold with proceeds divided accordingly, retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and all funds identified by the forensic audit." Gregory started to object, but Judge Okonkwo held up a hand. "I'm not finished. Mr. Brightwell will also pay spousal support in the amount of $4,000 per month for 5 years, plus child support as calculated by state guidelines. Additionally, he will assume all marital debt." The judge looked directly at Malcolm. "Mr. Brightwell, you tried to punish your wife for wanting more from her life. You tried to keep her small, dependent, and under your control. Instead, she became an attorney, built a career, and exposed your dishonesty. Let this be a lesson. When you try to destroy someone, make sure they don't come back stronger." She picked up her gavel. "This court finds in favor of the petitioner. Case closed." The gavel fell. The sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder. It was over. Keisha felt tears stream down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were release, relief, vindication. Marcus squeezed her shoulder. Victoria smiled. From the gallery, her mother and sister rushed forward, embracing her in a fierce hug. Malcolm stood slowly and walked out without looking at anyone. Gregory followed, already on his phone, probably beginning the damage control that would define the next phase of Malcolm's life. Outside the courtroom, Keisha stood in the sunlight, breathing deeply. Her phone buzzed with congratulations from colleagues and friends. But the message that mattered most came from Amara. "Dad told us, we'll be living with you most of the time. I'm glad, Mom. I missed you." Keisha wiped her eyes and smiled through the tears. She'd won more than a court case. She'd won her life back. She'd won her children. She'd won proof that she was never nothing. She was everything she'd needed to be all along. As she walked to her vehicle, she thought about that moment in court days ago when Malcolm had laughed at her, when he'd said she couldn't afford a lawyer. She thought about Judge Okonkwo's response, those 4 devastating words that had changed everything. You already did understand, because Keisha had understood. She'd understood her worth, her strength, her power, and in the end, that understanding had been worth more than all of Malcolm's hidden money, all his arrogance, all his cruelty. She drove home to her small apartment, the one she'd soon be leaving for something bigger, something better, something she'd earned. And for the first time in years, Keisha Brightwell felt completely, utterly free. So viewers, what do you think about Keisha's journey? Have you or someone you know ever had to rebuild from nothing? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about resilience and justice, do me a favor and share it. These stories need to be told. These voices need to be heard. Until next time, remember, you're never as powerless as someone wants you to believe. And the truth always finds a way.